With me today is Parker Mays. Parker's an undergrad at North Carolina State University in the United States, a global communications intern at LexisNexis, and the host of Taking a Breath podcast. Welcome, Parker, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So just to give everyone a little bit of a background, Parker and I crossed paths recently because we both started our podcasts around the same time. Now, I was really impressed with what you were doing, Parker, and the message that you were trying to share. So I wanted to have you on the show to talk about your podcast and your life experiences so far.
Absolutely.
So you're in the United States and I'm in Australia, so our education system's a little bit different. Could you just explain how university works in America, like what year you're in and how many more years you have left?
For sure. So right now I'm undergrad, so 4 years, and I am in my third year, so I'm a junior. And basically, the 4-year degree is essentially enough to get you into the workforce. Like you can, especially with business, you can do a lot of things with it. And then you can pursue what they call an MBA, Masters of Business Admin, if you want to continue. But so right now I'm in my undergrad studying marketing. And like you mentioned, I'm doing some global communications stuff, which is really exciting and helps to tie into some of this type of stuff that I'm doing on the side as well.
That's awesome. Now, you graduated high school with a 4.39 GPA, which from what I understand is really quite outstanding. So what was your high school experience like?
Yes. So with the school that I went to, it was private school, so public school with public funding, government funding, and then the private school. The one that I went to was actually basically you get to take honors classes, and so that boosts your GPA. With most grading, it's on a 4.0 scale, so it would be out of 4. With mine, with that 4.4 GPA, I was graded on a 5.0 scale, which is essentially just if you're taking those extra level classes, the honors level or the higher level. And then there's what we have called AP, which is like kind of an even higher level where you're taking almost college or university level classes. So yes, it definitely was good. It's always hard being a high achiever in high school and then transitioning to a university where you're, kind of in the middle of the pack. And so it definitely, I know some people really struggled with that side of it, transitioning from being that top percent to kind of the middle of the pack. But it definitely has been something that I've felt good about adjusting to.
So how much pressure did you feel in high school to do well?
I think my parents did a really good job of balancing the getting good grades with also being a well-rounded individual, making sure that I was involved in sports, staying active, hanging out with friends, being involved in clubs. And that's really paid off because now I'm able to speak well. I'm able to meet people, communicate. I'm able to enjoy things that I'm involved in, not put too much stress on, this one test. If I don't get a good grade, right, I'm not making it to the next level, right? I think it's all about a healthy balance. And that's really what my parents kind of instilled in me in terms of just living a well-rounded life and being able to do what you want and still getting the grades that are going to get you to where you want to go. I think that's been a big emphasis.
Because you did quite a lot of extracurricular activities during high school and now you're also doing that at university. So what do you think your driver was to complete those extra things? Do you think it came from your parents or do you think it was something deep down that you wanted to do?
For me, my parents definitely have been a big inspiration. They are very involved in the community and in church and different things like that. And so I think I saw that example of them really investing in the people around them and investing in me, my younger brother as well. But then for me, there was kind of a sense of really wanting to make my own path and go my own way. And so that's kind of where I got into some of this like entrepreneur stuff and digital technology and really wanting to get out, meet new people from different backgrounds, which is part of the reason why I love this podcast so much. Is it's people from all different backgrounds doing all sorts of different things and bringing them to one place for people like me to be able to listen to people's stories that otherwise wouldn't have that voice.
That's fantastic. Well, that's exactly the message that I want to get across is that there's so many different people out there. There's so many different opportunities and paths that you can sort of go down. So that's fantastic. Now, how did you decide on what university course that you wanted to do? Because there is so much out there. So what
Oh my
made you
gosh.
hone in on marketing and business?
Yeah, so marketing for me really made sense because I knew that I wanted something that I could take anywhere. And it's different for everybody, right? Some people, oh, I knew I wanted to do engineering, or I wanted to do to be a doctor. For me, I really didn't know where I wanted to go or where I wanted to end up long term, and I really told myself like that's okay. And so for me, marketing was okay. I know that I want to be able to work in a industry that I want. I want to be able to do like have options to do some things that I would like to do. And so marketing, right? I could take it to, a startup business, a long-term business. I could do a safe job. I could do entrepreneurship. There's so many ways that I could use it. And for me, that flexibility really opened up a lot of doors. And that's why I chose kind of the business and specifically the marketing side of things.
So how did you know that that was sort of going to be a broad degree that was going to open up sort of different pathways for you? Was that something that your school counselors and your parents sort of helped you with, or was that research or just things that you sort of heard and viewed online or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really it had just been something. So my parents are both in business in general. Neither of them are in marketing. But I had always grown up hearing about the business structure, hearing about what they're doing, these different things. And for me, marketing was kind of this way that as I'm getting older and getting into high school, I'm thinking through, okay, well, every business, no matter when it is, no matter what it looks like, is gonna have to have marketing, sales in order for growth. So it's one of those industries that though it's going to adapt and it's going to change, right? Marketing in a newspaper 30 years ago versus marketing on Instagram now looks completely different. If you're adaptable and you can change with the times, marketing is always going to be an industry that's going to be extremely beneficial to any company, no matter what industry they're in.
So speaking about being adaptable, you're in your third year of university now, so you've had a couple of years on campus and then COVID hit. So
Right.
how did you find the change from being going to class every day to, I'm assuming you moved to online study? Is that how it
I,
worked for you guys?
Yes, so we are partially online, partially in person right now. 4 out of my 5 classes, though, are online. You're exactly right. And they did last semester switch online. And so it definitely is a change. And I think some people have the tendency to say, okay, this change has happened, to me and just kind of let it happen. And then some people are more of the mindset of like, okay, action and then reaction, right? So we got sent home. Now, what am I going to do? What's my next step? How can I see success? And that was kind of where I know we kind of started planning around the same time of starting the podcast. I was like, how can I stay connected? How can I talk to new people and meet new people while I'm in this online platform? And so it wasn't just school for me, right? Once I got home and realized like, okay, school's like honestly a little bit of a joke because no one was prepared for that change. I was like, how can I continue to grow? Because that's for me, learning and growth is a constant mindset, not just school. That's a big one for me. This semester, right, we get back, we're online, I'm meeting some people, but largely online. It's really about just figuring out how to own the Zoom classes and the online lectures, all of this. I mean, I think it is hard, right? That's something that people aren't really saying. Like, it's really hard to adapt to all of these changes that are coming our way. But really finding people to bring alongside you and say, hey, this is hard, but we're in it together. And I think that's been huge, especially for like the young leaders platform that I'm trying to build. I'm like, guys, we're all, 18 to 20 years old right now, living in the middle of something that we haven't seen in, hundreds of years. And it's that type of mentality of, we're not alone, even though you might feel like you're alone because you're at your house by yourself. We're in this together virtually. We're going to stay connected and we're here with you, supporting you.
So you're really connected with everybody. So what made you want to have that connectedness? Because you're a real driver in your age bracket, bringing people together. And we'll talk a bit about your podcast in a minute. But what makes you want to be so connected with people?
Yeah, a lot of it is my personality. I mean, being extroverted in this time is something, right? When you're stuck at home, it's hard. So for me, and part of the internship helped because I learned all these video conferencing tools over the last year. And now I'm like instantly applying all of it in my own life. And so it kind of, the timing worked out really well. And it's always interesting when things like that happen. You're like, yeah, that happened for a reason. But for me, staying connected, I know of people who struggled with anxiety, depression, and those serious topics that when left by themselves, it can become very destructive. And so for me, that was one of the big drivers is I know that people aren't having it as easy as me, where I'm just like, all right, well, I guess I'm just scrolling through social media. I know that people are really struggling with self-doubt and self-insecurity and all these things that they're now stuck alone with. And that was part of the reason for connection. And it's not, trying to pat myself on the back. It was literally just, I know you're my friend. I know you've been struggling with this. Like, let me come alongside you. Let me connect with you, and let's talk things out, because I know you've had a lot of time to be thinking through this type of thing.
Well, I personally think that you should give yourself a pat on the back because you've done a real good job of bringing together a lot of young people and making them feel like they're not alone. So, yeah, absolutely. I think you should be patting yourself on the back for that one. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your internship at LexisNexis. Now, we don't really have internships in Australia. So, could you just give everybody a little bit of an insight into what an internship is?
Sure. So an internship, basically, if you want to go into a job, right? So for example, mine isn't a great example because if I wanted a marketing internship, this wouldn't be the exact one. But in general, an internship is, okay, I want to graduate from university and go into this job. While I'm in university, I'm going to practice, right, with this summer job that's at a business. And so that's kind of the overall idea of an internship is long term. I want to have this job, so I'm going to practice for very cheap right now with this company, basically.
So I was going to ask, do you get paid?
So mine is paid. It's paid similarly to just if I was working at a grocery store or a fast food restaurant, but basically they bring in college students to do really, basic tasks or just really learning in the industry. But then it looks really good on your resume when you graduate and you say, hey, I worked at LexisNexis for a year doing their global communication stuff. So it's kind of a resume thing, rather than really you're making the big bucks.
Because that organization is huge. So, absolutely, it's fantastic to have on your resume. But how did you secure the role? How did you get it?
So I think a lot of universities in the U.S., because it is a big part of our culture of prepare yourself to be in the job world. Universities do a good job of connecting you with jobs or with internship opportunities. And so mine was just, I was reaching out to a few different people that I had seen that they had job listings. And then that was kind of how I got connected with it. Had heard back from a couple of people, but LexisNexis, like you said, the global company, this opportunity sounded really cool. I get to work with C-suite, really high up executives on different branches. And I saw that and I was like, I've already emphasized the importance of connection. And this was a really good way to connect with some really great people that could down the road, have a lot of benefits. So that was kind of my approach first, just reaching out to a bunch of people, and then the real why I'm here.
So you speak about reaching out and having that connectedness and obviously being able to deal with C-suite, and that's, an amazing opportunity, especially, at your age. Do you find that that's more beneficial to you than being in an internship that's much more marketing and business related?
That's a great question. And I think I really will never know. I might at the next internship, or if I switch, right now I'm really enjoying it. But it's interesting because it's different for everybody. Some people would say, okay, I want to be in a marketing and sales position. I'm only going to look at this one, marketing and sales specific internship. And for me, I realized am I going to get more value out of just sifting through a spreadsheet? Or am I going to get more value out of meeting the CEO of this company? And it was like, all right, like really weighing your value. So I think for everyone it's different, but for me it really was just, it made a lot of sense to try to find somewhere where I could invest and meet the right people, and then, see a long-term job come from it. That's great.
So I've spoken to a lot of people on this podcast, and the overarching sort of theme comes back as networks are so critical to your career path. So I think you're onto a winner with that one.
Good.
But what do you want your career to look like?
That is a great question. And that's something that actually on my podcast, I have asked a lot of people, because I'm always curious, it's something that looks different for everyone. The idea of success or fulfillment from your job. And that's something that I've really started to narrow down, as I can't really put my finger on what that's going to look like yet. For me, I think being fulfilled wherever you are is a very important thing, because especially for people my age, I talk to a lot of 18 to 20-year-olds that they're waiting for the right opportunity to be happy, and that can go on forever. Right. I struggle with that concept of people saying, well, once I graduate, I'm going to be happy. I'm done with school. Or once I get a job, I'm going to be happy. Or once I have a family, I'm going to be happy, and just delaying that happiness. And if you can't let yourself be happy and fulfilled where you are, then to me, that isn't worth being where you're at. Right. And so that's always been my thing with the internship, with school. I want to get as much value, and I want to feel as much success, fulfillment, happiness from that thing as I can. And so long term, right, I struggle with that. What's that going to look like? I don't know, because wherever I'm at, if it's I have an amazing job, I have an amazing family, all of these things, yeah, they're long-term goals, they're kind of big goals. But if I can take one step toward that big goal every day, then that to me is fulfillment and success.
So do you feel happy at the moment?
Absolutely. 100%. And I say that with 100% seriousness, that COVID happened. And yes, like there are a lot of, it's hard because you see the things going on in the world. You see people getting, testing positive, and all of these different things. And it's hard balancing that. Okay, yes, there is hurt in the world, but personally, I still feel happy. And so that's something that I've always struggled with, because empathy is a big thing for me, of like feeling empathy for these families that may have lost loved ones or things like that. But personally, in my own life, happiness is a constant. And it's just positivity, right? But like for me, right this second, I think that, I gave the example, COVID happened. I got the chance to start this podcast, meet amazing people, create a platform. I would never have done that if I hadn't been stuck at home. I've gotten to meet these guys that are my new roommates. I just moved into this apartment, actually, which is why I don't have a great setup yet. And I've gotten to meet these amazing people. I might not have met them if we hadn't had COVID and had to change the living situation. So I think for me, it's about looking for the positivity and looking for the happiness in the situation, because I could say, dang, COVID happened, I got sent home, all of these things got canceled. And I said, dude, I got a chance to start an amazing podcast, meet amazing people, all that stuff.
Look, positivity just absolutely radiates from you. And we had a Zoom catch up a few weeks ago, and it just shone through, your positivity and everything. And I think a lot of young people can learn a lot from that, because I think there's a lot of people out there, young and old, that are all feeling quite sorry for themselves at the moment. And as you said, there's a lot of bad things that have happened to people, but that doesn't mean that you can have empathy without feeling sad within yourself. You can still be happy with your life and still have empathy for other people. So I think that's a really, sort of good message. Now, I would say that you're not a typical teen or young adult, in the sense that you spent so much of your time volunteering and putting yourself out there and really going after the opportunities that you see in front of you. And obviously, you put yourself out there with starting your new podcast, Taking a Breath. So could you just explain a little bit about your podcast and why you decided to start it?
Sure. So the motivation for my podcast personally was I wanted to connect with people that originally it was just mentors in my own life. So I was like, maybe this is an 8-week thing, and I put out an episode every week with people who have been really genuinely influential over the course of my lifetime. And so that started out. We get 8 weeks in, and I've got all these episodes, and I'm like, I'm just genuinely enjoying this. So then it turned from just being influences in my life and learning from them to just learning in general. And so that was kind of selfishly the reason I started it. And I knew that if I'm putting them out and people are listening to them, I'm going to continue wanting to have these conversations. So it was almost an accountability thing for me. This podcast just happened to be a product of an accountability from a project that was a personal goal for me, which kind of sounds crazy that was kind of how I felt that I needed to do it. But it has held me accountable. And every single week, I get to talk to someone and get to learn from them. And then from there now, so I have a team helping me develop the platform. That now the platform is kind of, our goal is to create a resource for young leaders who may not know what their next steps are or what their leadership journey is going to look like, to take their next steps, to meet other leaders that are going to help to progress them on their journey. One thing that we're working on starting out right now is like a virtual community, group chats, Zoom calls, all of these different resources where actual young leaders from across the world, across the country, can get face-to-face, learn from each other's struggles, especially during this time.
So I'll touch on your team in a minute, because
Sure.
obviously it went from just you to, now you've got a bunch of people helping you, which is just awesome. But I first wanted to just talk about your guests. Now, you've had some really good guests on your show. So how have you selected them? Like, what's made you decide to interview those particular people?
Yeah, I think at first, I mean, we've definitely seen uh, what would you say, the timeline of things. Like if I'm looking back at the first couple of episodes and seeing, these people that I almost picked on a whim. I was like, who's been influential student leaders, or kind of over the course of my life, kind of pick some people on a whim. And that was how it started, was just, I wanted to get started. I wanted to start the conversation. And then from there, it became like, all right, let's look at the network. Who's connected with who, So for example, Lindsay, I had a couple weeks ago, she's the CEO of a nonprofit here in Raleigh where I live. And her nonprofit is a coffee shop that it employs adults with disabilities. Just an incredible mission-driven, just incredible leader. And I got to talk to her about mission-driven living and talk to her about what her coffee shop's doing, all these cool things. And it was just because one of my friends knew her directly. And that just happened to be it. And so for me, it's just been kind of expanding my network, talking to some people and saying, hey, who do you know? Who can I talk to? Who would you recommend? I have a lot of people that are now kind of invested in the podcast just because I've been asking for their advice. I've been saying, hey, can you share some thoughts and ideas? And then, they do. I have them on, or I'm, continuing the conversation with them. And then I say, who would you recommend talking to? And they make that introduction. And that's really been a great way to continue bringing on really fantastic guests. And now I had my first international guest, a business owner, an entrepreneur from London in the UK. I had my first out-of-state guest from New York and California in the US. And so it's just been really cool to see the growth of where just one day starting a conversation to now talking to people all over the world. It's incredible.
Absolutely. I think from watching you, it's definitely been an evolution. So from, your first podcast to, I think you had a new one. Is it today or yesterday that it went live?
Yeah, they come out Fridays, but I think today I posted a clip from one that I did with somebody else. I did one on somebody else's podcast that came out today. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that must have been what I saw. But yeah, so I definitely see that it's been an evolution. Your guests are, I wouldn't want to say getting more interesting or anything like that, but more diverse, I suppose. But do you find it really difficult to reach out to strangers? You're obviously a very confident person, but do you still feel it's a bit daunting, especially reaching out to people internationally?
So two things on that. One, with the guests, and I would say, and I struggle to say this, that just kind of the quality as I'm learning has kind of improved, but it's not because the guests have gotten better. It's because I have become a better host. I'm learning how to ask the right questions. So I clarify that just because I love, of course, all the guests that have been on and appreciate them. But it's really been an evolution of me learning how to ask the right questions. And so that's why the quality is getting better. It's 100% me, not anything the guests are doing. But then to answer your questions, all right, and that was just a kind of a clarification, but to answer your question, confidence is something that is kind of a personality thing for me, but I have struggled a little bit with that initial like jump to a conversation. But I feel like once I make that initial introduction of like, hey, would love to hear more of your story. I think that's kind of how our conversation started, was just, hey, tell me a little bit about the podcast you're starting. And then the conversation just goes from there. I think that if you can find a point of connection, especially one that someone is passionate about, then you're naturally going to have that chemistry from the start.
Yeah, definitely. I think that first sort of, reach out is probably the most difficult. But, as we
Yeah.
sort of just started chatting a few weeks ago, the conversation really just, flowed. And I think we chatted for ages. So
Yeah.
it was really good. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. And I learned things as well, which was, awesome to be able to speak to somebody and to learn new things. And that's, I love doing that. So
Absolutely.
that's fantastic. Now, just going back to your team. So, it started with you and now you've got a bunch of people on board to help you with it, which is amazing. And I think, it's probably more prevalent with younger people that are able to have a lot more people get involved in what they do, whether it be because they've got more time or they're just more energetic. But how did your team come to fruition?
Yes. So the team building thing has been something I've talked a good amount about on the podcast. And as a result of that, I've learned from a lot of people about team building, about how to find the right people. For me, it was about just looking for people who were really eager to learn, eager to own it, like working just as hard on this as if it was their own project. And I really found that I felt like I connected with the right people. And it was just kind of a chance thing of like, I wasn't anything that I did specifically. I was just looking for this type of person. I did have a couple people reach out to me that aren't helping me out right now, and it was just not the right time or not the right fit. But I think one thing that is very underrated is the value of young people in this space and in social media and in technology. And the reason is because I don't think adults a lot of times understand the value of a teenager's skill set right now. So for example, we'll look at, and I hesitate to talk about like just the social media TikTok. I don't know how familiar you are or you guys are with it, but in general, all it is a video editing app. It's just, you make a quick video, you post it, other people can like it. That's just a very broad overview of the concept. But through that, people are learning how to edit sounds, edit video, creativity. I mean, it is so applicable in life skills. They're learning how to work with social media, which is so prevalent across all platforms. And so I was doing consulting with a nonprofit 2 weeks ago, and it's a nonprofit that's doing like education for children in Jamaica, and they have a school that they've started. They have all these different things, and I was doing specifically marketing consulting, which was great. And she brought me on and was just asking some questions. They're looking at starting some email campaigns, different things like this. And as I'm talking to her, I was like, have you really thought, she had asked me specifically, like, hey, I know you're really outgoing, you're really over the top with some of this stuff. Would you be interested in helping out? I was like, personally, I really have a lot on my plate right now, but could I connect you with one of my friends, 18, 19-year-old friends? And she kind of mentioned like, well, I was kind of interested in working with you just because I know you have a lot of background. And I was like, I totally understand that. But after talking through some of the things I just said, she realized like, oh, wow, like I really could get value out of that 18, 19-year-old kid. Whereas before, her mindset was much more like, I need someone who's just either older or just really mature. I think like teens know technology, teens know marketing, teens know. So I give the marketing example because that's my space. But I mean, it's just, you really have to realize that there's so many tools that kids know so well, and we don't even think that they're going to be applicable to the things that we really need them for in the business nonprofit spaces.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that young people bring so much to, business in general. And I personally I just completely can't stand when, on job ads and everything, people say, you must have a minimum of 5 years experience or something like that.
Right.
Because I really think that, younger people, they're more adaptable. They're able to jump right in and learn new things. And definitely I've learned a lot of things with regards to social media from younger people, because before sort of doing the podcast, I was never really somebody on social media. I'd, maybe post a couple of things on LinkedIn, but that was probably about it. So,
Sure.
learning all about social media, and I definitely don't use TikTok. But then I just heard that Instagram has got a new thing called Reels or something. So
And
I'm
so
thinking,
real.
yeah, that's another thing that we've got to sort of learn. But yeah, I think there's so much that can be learnt from younger people.
And I think it's a balance too, because I with my internship, right, I work with all only people older than me. I'm the youngest person at our site in our company, and so I see the value too of people who have been in the industry for a long time and have worked with that. And so I think it's a balance for everything, right? With my team, it's all 17 to 19-year-olds, and it just happens to be that way, college high school graduates or still in high school. But I am getting so much value out of these people who have been with the company for 20, 25 years, right? I could never imagine being at a company that long, but these people have just put their life into this company, and I'm like seeing all of these things, years worth of experience. So I think we as young people a lot of times don't like to admit that we're wrong, or don't like to admit that we know things. But if you're willing to take the pride down for a second and just say, hey, I really need to learn from you. What can I learn from you? Share with me. Then that's when we're able to also get the experience. And people see maturity in that. For young people listening to this, like, adults see maturity when you're willing to ask questions, when you're willing to learn from them, because then they're also more open to, and this is my experience just personally, and maybe Christy, you can share a little bit, but in my experience, if you're willing to ask the right questions from them, they're also willing and more open to learning from you as well.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I do think in a workplace, for young and old, it's really hard to say, "Hey, I don't know that. I don't understand
Mm,
what you're talking about. I'm not as skilled as you are in that. Can you please show me?" And I think that's something that is a learned thing. I
for
don't
sure.
think it's easy. I don't think it comes easy to most people to say, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing." But I think once you put your hand up and you do say, and you are a bit vulnerable about it, and so I don't know, can you please show me? And you show the respect to that person to ask for help and to ask for their knowledge, and to respect that knowledge. I think that goes a long way, definitely in business.
I think for young people, it's a lot about maturity. And for older people asking for younger people's help, a lot of times that side of it is earned. Like, I really need to be able to show that I have the experience of, like, you should take my advice, right? Because I think from a younger person asking an older person, you just need to be mature enough to say, okay, I need your help. I need to ask questions. I need to ask for advice. Versus, the older person asking the younger person. I think a lot of times that is where it's like, okay, here's why, this, and really explaining that side of it. But that's great.
So, just on a personal level, do you find it easier to ask strangers and different people for help as opposed to your parents?
I do. And that's something I've struggled with for a long time. I always felt like it was easier or almost more credible to ask people that I didn't know for advice. And that's something I've really grown in. is now I have a much better, and it's been since I moved out of the house for university, that I feel like I have a better relationship with my parents, because I'm seeing like, oh man, there was actually a lot of value there that I wasn't taking advantage of, or I wasn't really learning from them. So if there's high schoolers or 14 to 18-year-olds listening to this, like, it is hard to listen to your parents or like learn, like feel like you should really be like learning from your parents. But if you have parents who are in a good place with you and are where, or are where you want to be, like really take advantage of that. So that's really been my biggest advice, because I've realized the value of their input over the last couple of years being away.
So note to my son, you need to start listening to me.
That's right. That's right.
Now, I wanted just to talk a little bit with you, Parker, about your experience with influencers. So obviously, young people use social media a lot, and influencers, a lot of people have made, their life out of being, influencers on different platforms of social media. So what's been your experience with those people?
For me, a big issue is that like with influencers, there's a lot of stuff out there on their platforms that I wouldn't necessarily put out on my platform if I had a bigger platform or more influence. That being said, I shared on someone's podcast last week this concept of like influencer, like being a bad influence on someone, has kind of been what this term, at least in the US, and I know it is culturally a little bit different as well in some cultures, but my concept of influencer and my idea of it has always been like, if we can redeem that word and make it something that's actually positive, that's kind of my goal. So if someone ever referred to me as an influencer as my platform grows, then I wouldn't want them to be associating me with what a lot of that common word means, which is just attention seeker, or like just trying to do whatever to get the most attention. That's a lot of it. But rather being like, yo, this dude is a good influence, right? Like, he really cares about the people that are following him or consuming his content. And if you can create that relationship of knowing like, this isn't just entertainment, but it's actually like me trying to create a relationship with you, then that's where you can see the most value out of that influencer role.
Absolutely. And I think the podcasting world is very much like that, because it doesn't necessarily matter how many followers you have. It's about the people that are engaging with your content, which I think with, sort of Instagram and things like that, it's completely different. It's, people just want likes, and, people don't necessarily like the things that they're liking. They just sort of feel that they have to,
Yeah,
if you know what I mean.
for
But
sure.
how much influence do you think these people actually have on young people?
The scary thing is, I do think they have a lot. I really do. I think that people are looking for fast entertainment. Part of the reason that the podcast space that I'm in is so difficult is because I am in creating content that is going to make you think, it's going to challenge you, it's going to take you to the next level. And what a lot of people want when they're consuming content right now is something that they can watch. That's why TikTok is so popular. 30-second video, I laugh at the end of it, I like it, and I swipe, and I'm on to the next video. Versus something like this, where it's 20, 30, 40 minutes worth of conversation. It's challenging. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you work for it to get the good stuff. You can't just be sitting in bed, swiping through it. It's actually, it's actually a challenge. I think the biggest concern is the attention span, right? I mean, that's something that we as podcasters have to struggle through, is finding that right time and getting the right metrics and everything like that. But influencers, part of the reason that it's so easy to consume their content is because if you are just looking for something that's fast, it's going to entertain you, and then you're done, then that influencer culture is what's creating that, right? What's Kylie Jenner wearing this week? What's Kanye West's new song sound like? Like, all of these different things are just creating really fast, like, all right, next, what's a trend? What's next? And that's influencer culture to me.
So it's sort of like an instant sort of gratification.
Yes.
Now, can you see that sort of changing, or do you think that that's sort of here to stay for the short term anyway?
I think it will get worse. as young, and the culture might be different as well, country wise. But here, a lot of it is like attention spans are getting shorter. Like, whereas used to, I could watch a movie. Now I only want to watch a 20-minute Netflix episode. Whereas used to, I could watch a full 2-minute video or a full 10-minute video on YouTube. Now I only want to watch a 1-minute video on Instagram. Whereas I used to want to watch a 1-minute video on Instagram. Now I want to watch a 15-second TikTok, right? I think that because, and this is marketing, this is why I am so passionate about this, is because whoever created TikTok realized attention spans are getting shorter. We need to create a product that is going to cater to that. And it's brilliant, right? Like, from their perspective, they have, I think I read last week, 93 million users or something consuming an hour a day. And that could be not the right number, but it was some absolutely absurd number of hours being consumed every day and every week. And so like from across all of their users. And so it's things like that if marketers are smart, which they are, because they're these young people, a lot of marketing people are these young people that know young culture, they're going to continue creating products that are going to play to instant gratification. They're going to play to these young people that are consuming. And that's why I say, like, get worse, not in a negative way, but it's just like, it's the way the world's working. It's digital, it's virtual, and it's instant gratification.
Yeah, I find it interesting because, as you said, you're down to TikTok and it's 15 seconds type thing, but people will watch 100 of those in a day.
Yes.
So they are actually consuming the time frame, but just not on one particular topic.
Yes. So so my roommate is a big, like, TikTok consumer. He'll consume, his screen time shows 2 hours per day, every day of the week on TikTok. So 14 hours a week on this one app, right? Which to me, I'm like, wow, that's kind of a lot. But he's like, oh, 2 hours, that's just me sitting in bed, right? And we get along great. So but I think it's this idea of, like, it's almost, I think of it in terms of, like, you're searching for the right video that's finally going to make you laugh so hard that you're done with the app almost. It's like this idea of, like, all right, this one's funny, right? And, like, when will I find this perfect video almost? And it's just like, you never are. You're just going to keep scrolling. So I agree with you. And I think that's a huge point, is that it's not just, you're still consuming the same amount of time, but because it feels so broken up and there's all these different topics and all these different things, I think that's why people can stand to sit there like what he's doing and do 2 hours a day just back to back.
I wish I had 2 hours a day to spend doing something like that.
Right? I know.
But I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier about delaying happiness. So you're putting it off. Like, I'll find happiness in the next video. I'll find happiness in the next video. And you're not really finding it. You're just searching for it.
Right.
So I do hope that sort of changes into the future, where people are satisfied, because it seems like, no one's satisfied with what they've actually got. Everyone's searching for something else, and they really need to probably take stock and appreciate the things that they actually do have.
I would love it if that is true, 100%. And don't get me wrong, like, the content that I'm creating, everything that I'm doing gears towards that. Find fulfillment, find success, take the steps towards take that first step from where you are to where you want to be. All of my content is geared towards that. And part of the struggle with being in that is that a lot of people aren't interested in that. And so by a 100% hope that it does, like you're saying, like, people start gearing back towards, like, I realize, like, I need to find happiness. I need to find actual fulfillment rather than just this short-term kind of meaningless fulfillment.
Yeah, it's sort of like taking a drug. It only lasts you for a little while, and then you're searching for it again and again and again and again. So it can't be healthy. I wanted to ask you as well, where do you see your podcast going? Like, what's your plan? Obviously, you've got this young leadership group that you're trying to establish. Where do you see your podcast ending up?
That's funny because my roommate just asked me that at dinner. A new guy I just met. He just moved in yesterday, and he goes, "Yo, so I saw you doing a podcast, all this, right?" And he's like, "Where do you think you're going to do it full time?" And my response to him was like, honestly, like if I could really start to build an audience and make some money from it and kind of continue creating on the side, like that would be a huge goal and an accomplishment for me of like having a main job, right? Of like doing what I'm passionate about, whether it's starting my own business or whether it's working for someone, whatever that looks like. But then on the side, continuing to do this, because for right now, this space really feels authentic to me. I can have a genuine conversation with someone and then we can put it out in a 20-minute episode and share it with people. That to me really feels like authentically how I want to communicate and what my platform looks like. And then just adapting. I mean, it's not always going to be, podcasting is actually growing a lot, especially in the US right now. And it might be the same. I know it is for India. I know it is for the UK, really growing right now. And so I think it's a good time to be starting. But then from there, who knows? Like, who knows what the next level of technology is? Who knows what the next platform is that we might need to adapt to? And that might not be long form communication. And so I think it's really goes back to adaptability of like, today, I absolutely love it. I'm happy podcasting. And in 1 year from today, we might have hologram video and that's the new platform, right? Obviously an extreme example, but who knows where we're going to be 5 years, 10 years from today and what that will look like. So that's why I don't put the limit on exactly where it's going to go long term.
Fantastic. Look, you are so inspiring, Parker. I absolutely love speaking to you, and I could chat to you every week just to give me that little bit of positivity. I love it. And I'm really glad that, young people like you are really putting themselves out there and trying to, I suppose, make more out of life than TikTok videos. You really are trying to get the best out of it. And I think
Yes.
that's probably one of the biggest messages that I take away from your podcast is that there is more substance to young people than older people want to give you recognition for. So I really, really appreciate that. But I do have one question for you, Parker.
Sure.
What would you do differently if only you knew?
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest advice and answer to that would be I would have started earlier. I mean, for me, right, I have gotten to college, I'm making connections, I'm doing things that I wanted, but I've always been that kid who wanted to get started but didn't know where to start. I've wanted to work with entrepreneurs. I've always been ahead of the curve on getting started. And that's part of the reason this resource that I'm creating is so valuable is because if I was 15, if I was 16 right now, if I had a resource like this, I would be so far ahead and so dedicated to doing what I would want. So for me, starting what I was doing just earlier, and specifically in terms of connecting with the right people. I was always scared to ask for advice. I was always scared to meet new people. And once I got out of that shell and started talking to the right people, started meeting people, that's when the opportunities opened up. So it's all about getting out of your shell, connecting with the right people, and then that one person opens up the opportunity, and there you are.
Absolutely. Now, look, anybody listening, if they want to connect with Parker, obviously they can listen to his podcast called Taking a Breath, and they can also follow him on Instagram and LinkedIn. I will have his full bio on our website, ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au, and I highly encourage everyone to reach out to Parker and to join the leadership program that Parker is putting together, because it's a really great way for everybody to connect. So thanks so much for joining me today, Parker. I've really appreciated talking to you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Parker. That was awesome.
Thank you. That was so fun. And